Exercise 709 is going to have us define, like usual, two Java files, the e709.java, which is going to be our test file, and the MyInteger.java, that is going to be the class MyInteger. So what we need to put into that class is specified in exercise 709. First, we need an attribute. This attribute is going to be of type int. The name of the attribute will be value, and this is going to contain the integer value encapsulated inside of an object of class MyInteger. Then we need a constructor, so public MyInteger. First question: does this constructor take any parameter? Yes, it takes a value as parameter, and therefore the job of this constructor is to assign to our field value the parameter value. We need also a get method for the attribute value, so it's going to return an int. The name is getValue, and it's going to simply return the attribute value. So this took care already of the first three items. Okay, so we are going to save right now. We're going to start by testing this. So can I create a variable myInt, which is going to be, or let's just call it x, which is going to be a reference on an object of class MyInteger. Actually, we are going to have several of them, so let's call it x1. And I'm going to create a new object of class MyInteger. Pass as parameter the default value I want. Let's go with 0. And that should have created an integer, a MyInteger object containing the value 0. So how do I check that? System.out.println, and I'm going to display on the screen x1 equal, and I can use here the getValue method to retrieve the value stored inside of x1. So we have a little bit of code done. We have the way to test that code. Well, let's go ahead and do a Java C. It will start a Java. No compilation problem. Let's try to run the program. x1 equals 0. Well, if I go back to my code, this is the value that I passed inside of it. Okay, so right now we have minimum amount of code, but it's running, and we can double check it. Then the next three items are: we need to write methods isEven, isOdd, isPrime, which return true if the value stored inside of the MyInteger object is actually responding to those predicate. Beside this, we need to write static methods isEven, isOdd, isPrime, and this time they take a parameter of type int, and they check if that integer is actually respecting the predicates. Then we need three methods, again isEven, isOdd, and isPrime, which take MyInteger object as parameter and that are static. So we have a lot of methods that are going to end up doing the same job. Okay, so let's start by the most obvious. I'm going to go back to the MyInteger class. Let's try by public boolean. Each method returns true or false. Is prime. The is prime here is going to be called on an object of class MyInteger. But since we know that we need to also write a method which is going to test, a static method which is going to test if any int value is prime, we can just implement this one by passing the attribute value to the version which is taking a parameter. This version is going to be public static boolean is prime int, let's call it n, num, whatever, open curly brace. And in this method, we are going to actually do the job of determining whether num is prime or not. So if num equal 1 or num equal 2, well, in those cases, let me check the parentheses. This is a no-brainer. Okay, we return true. What else? Well, if this didn't work, then we are going to use the same algorithm that we developed in previous exercise. Okay, we are going to start iterating at 2. We're going to keep iterating as long as I is lesser than num divided by 2, and we increment I at each iteration. What do we do in this loop? Well, if num modulo I equal 0, so if we find a divisor, return false. Else, we keep iterating. Once we are done with this loop, if we do not find anything that forced us to return false, we return true. So there is nothing new here. We already implemented isPrime as a main program. We implemented it as a method. Now we implement it as a method of the MyInteger class. What is left for us to do with isPrime? Well, what about public static boolean is prime? But this time we want this method to work with another MyInteger object, which I'm going to just refer to as parameter O. Well, how do we implement this one? Well, we have already isPrime method which works on an int. So let's take O, let's extract the value, the int value of O, and pass it to our static isPrime method which we just wrote. So really, this one here, this method and that method are just relying on the existence of this method to get the job done. So we can test now if a number is prime. Let's save. Let's go back to the main and add some tests to play with this. MyInteger x2 is going to be a new MyInteger. Let's use 3. Okay. MyInteger. We know the case for 1 and 2 are going to work without problem. That's why I'm jumping immediately to 3. Integer, and let's use again 9. And we are going to display system.out.println. Let's display the value of x2. So I'm going to test get value again. And then we are going to test if it's prime or not. Is prime. And the answer will come with a little test. If x2 dot is prime is true, then system.out.println. Let me simplify this a little. I'm going to display the value and then I'm going to display a message which is prime or isn't prime directly. So I'm doing this right now. Println is prime, affirmative. And if not, I'm going to do a system.out.println isn't prime. And I forgot to put this opening double quote here. There we go. What else? Let's remove the println here. So we have everything on one line. And I can do the same thing for x3. Okay. So I'm going to move this declaration here. This is a block of code that is testing with 3. This is going to be the block of code that is testing with the value 9. So all I have to do is redirect all of my tests from variable x2 to variable x3. Let's save. Back to Conqueror. Java C. Read the syntax error, num with 2 m's. Let's move back here. This is in the class file, I think. Here, there we go. Save the file, Conqueror, compile again. This is working, run it. 3 is prime, 9 isn't prime. We could make more extensive tests, okay, but given the fact we are reusing code that we already validated, I can tell you already this code here is correct. So we are done with the isPrime. What is left for us to do? Well, we have the same type of job to do with isEven and with isOdd. So hopefully we can pick up a little bit of speed now, given the fact that we know we can rely on only one version of those methods. So let's try the isEven. Okay, public boolean is even, which is asking if the value I have right now is even. Well, I just defer the work and I call isEven on my own value. Similarly, public static, then I'm going to do the real job, okay? Boolean is even, taking a value int num. Well, there, I have to do the job here. How do I determine if a number is even? Well, I'm going to return actually n, num, whatever, modulo 2. If the remainder of the integer division by 2 is 0, then that's going to be this is going to be true. Sorry about that. And if it's not 0, then that means I cannot divide by 2 evenly, so it's an odd number. So there we go. what do I have left to do? Public static boolean is even, and I want another object of class MyInteger, which I call parameter O. And I'm going to do the same trick than above. Okay, I'm going to return is even and O dot get value. Well, let's make sure that I went fast through this. So let's make sure that there is no compilation error there. We are good. How do we test that? Well, we can test it the same way that we tested here this number. I'm going to do MyInteger x4 is a new integer. Well, actually I could reuse here x2, I guess, to determine if it's even. So I'm going to say x2 displays value. x2 is even. Depending on whether this is true or false, I'm going to display is even, isn't even. And I could simplify this code, but let's go with it for now, for the time being. I don't have an even number, so I'm going to introduce a variable. Let's call it x0. MyInteger, I need an even number. I'm going to use 300. And I'm going to display the value of x0, and I'm going to check if x0 is an even number. If it is, I display is even, otherwise isn't even. Okay, let's see if this is working. First, double check that there are no syntax error, then let's see that we are testing what we want to test. x1 is 0, 3 is prime, 9 isn't prime, 3 isn't even, 300 is even. Well, so far so good. Okay, what we have left to do, look back at the description in the book, we have to do the same job with is odd. Is odd is going to be even easier. Public boolean is odd. Well, how do you test that you are odd? You call return negation of is even with your own value. Actually, let me rephrase that. This is what we are going to do ultimately, but right now I'm just going to call is odd with our own value, and I'm going to do the same for the one working on another object of class MyInteger, and I'm going to do the real job when I have an int num as parameter, in which case I'm going to do return negation of is even. As you can see, I'm really struggling to reuse as much as I can code to make things easier. Okay, is odd MyInteger O. Same thing, return is odd, and I'm passing O.get value. So there are many more things I could add in my test on this. Okay, I'll leave that as an exercise, but pretty much we have enough code already to make sure that the basic structure of this class is working. If you are requested to test exhaustively this class, then you will have, of course, to make a little bit more test here. For example, you would have to call the static method of the class MyInteger, passing to them x2, x3, etc. directly. Okay, to test if this and this and this guy are actually even, odd, etc. So we are going to skip those tests for the sake of this correction. What do I have left to do? Well, I tested is even. I can test now is odd. There we go. So this is lacking really commands here. So I'm going to fix that because this is really getting difficult to follow. I'm going to say here testing get value method. I'm going to say here, what are we testing? Testing is prime method. And once again, I should do more tests on the static ones. Testing is even method. And it should be method once again. And we are going to be testing here. Testing is odd method. So, displays the value of x2. Is x2 odd? If yes, display on the screen is odd. or isn't odd. I don't need to redeclare x0. I'm just going to test if x0 is odd. Oops, uppercase O here. And display accordingly whether it is odd or not. Odd, odd. And there we go. So I'm going to save. Back to Conqueror. Let's test it real quick. Java C to compile, Java to run. 3 is odd, 300 isn't odd. So we are like almost done now with the feature required from us in that exercise. We are going to finish by implementing the method equals. There are two variants again of that method. So one of them is going to be public boolean equals, and this one is going to take another int, let's call it num, as parameter. So this one is going to be simply a matter of comparing our attribute value to the parameter num. And the second one is going to be public boolean equals, and this time MyInteger, another object of class MyInteger, and the comparison is going to be a matter of calling actually equals with o.getValue as we did all along. Save this, go back to the main. Oops. There we go. We are going to now test equal. Testing equals method. Once again, we should test, well, okay, let's do something like system.out.println x0 displays a string equal displays the content of x3 displays a string is followed by, well, true or false, and we are going to get that by calling x0 dot equals x3. And then we can make another test here, simply replacing x0 and x3 by a little problem with the cut and paste. Nope, this is not what I want to do. Control C, Control V. Alright, we are going to test x0 plus a value. We are going to hardcode the value. Okay, the value is going to be, what is x0? x0 is 300, so let's use 300. We're testing if x0 is equal to itself. Alright, and we're going to hardcode here 300 once again. Let's save. Back to Conqueror, compile, run. So, something funny here. We display some information about MyInteger actually, and then MyInteger, etc. So we are trying to display objects as a string. Little oops there. Let's go back. What we really meant to do was get value. I want the value of x0, the value of x3, and I want to compare them. Same thing here, get value, and we should be good. Go back to Conqueror, compile, execute. 300 equal 9 is false, 300 equal 300 is true. Okay, well, to be exhaustive, we should test x0 against itself. Okay, we can do that. Well, actually, I'll leave that as an exercise. It's just a matter of testing here x0 equals and pass as parameter x0 itself. So you can do that real quick. It's not going to be difficult or bring much to the conversation here anyway. MyInteger, this is a class. What do we have left to do? We have left a static method parseInt that converts a string to an int value. Okay, so public static boolean, whoops, string. Wait a minute, no, this is not actually going to, it's going to take an integer and convert a string to an int value. Okay, that question doesn't actually make sense. That's always a problem. So we want a static method parseInt which takes an integer value as parameter and converts a string to an int value. Okay, so let's fix the question. Public static int parseInt. So parseInt is going to take a string, let's call it str as parameter, and is going to parse an integer value out of that string. That makes a lot more sense. How do we do that? Well, we can use directly integer.parseInt, okay, and I'm going to pass str, and I'm going to return whatever this is returning to me. So we just reuse in our class the static method parseInt from the integer class. Let's go into Conqueror, javac, Java, and of course I forgot to test that new feature. So let's go. Testing parseInt method system.out.println, and we are going to use MyInteger.parseInt 999, and let's see how this displays on the screen. Conqueror, javac, run, 999 as an integer value. The correct way to make sure that this is an integer value, well, we can go back here, because after all it could be a string right now that is returned to us. So I'm going to do something like 1 plus the value returned to me, and if it is an int, it's going to work just fine. Javac, Java, there we go, 1000. And we are done with this class MyInteger, which I'm putting back on the screen right now.